Good evening to our esteemed viewers. Today, we are looking beyond the daily market tickers and evening headlines to uncover a silent, historical shift one that carries profound implications for the legacy we leave our children and the future of our own nation. How does a vast region lose 20 million people and exodus, matching the great migrations of human history, without a single shot being fired, without a famine, and while the entire world was applauding its newfound freedom? More importantly, what does the silent emptying of half a continent tell us about the ultimate safety of our Canadian pensions, the shifting value of our real estate, and the true meaning of generational wealth? As Canadians who have lived through the economic cycles of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, you have witnessed firsthand the evolution of global markets. But the story of Eastern Europe from 1992 to the present day offers a stark, unprecedented lesson in demographic economics. It is a masterclass in what happens when a society exports its most valuable asset, its human capital, and a mirror reflecting some of the quiet vulnerabilities creeping into our own North American towns. The invisible exodus let us step back to the spring of 1990. The Berlin Wall had fallen just months prior. The Soviet system was collapsing, and the borders of Eastern Europe were opening for the first time since 1945. Over 300 million people stood at the edge of a radically new world. The narrative sold to Western audiences was one of pure liberation. Emerging markets opening, borders falling, in a liberated region joyfully rejoining the West. History, however, recorded a much more complex reality. Over the next 30 years, 20 million people quietly walked out. There was no single dramatic moment to mark this loss. It became the largest peacetime migration in absolute numbers in modern European history, occurring entirely under the radar of the global press. While the initial waves were visible such as the 1.5 million Soviet Jews who emigrated to Israel, the US, and Germany, or the 2 million refugees fleeing the conflicts in the former Yugoslavia, what followed was entirely invisible. Nations that fought no wars simply began to empty. Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Moldova watched their citizens board budget, flights, and buses, ostensibly for short stints, only to never return. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) eventually counted the staggering toll. By 2012, approximately 5.5% of the entire region's 1990 population had vanished. The IMF described this phenomena as unprecedented in speed, scale, and persistence. Romania lost 16% of its population. Bulgaria lost 23%. Lithuania lost a quarter of its people. Latvia lost 30%. And Moldova lost an astonishing 40%. To put this in historical context, this wave matched the absolute scale of the Italian Great Migration, which took 45 years to unfold, and mirrored the proportional devastation of the Irish famine. Yet it happened without the trigger of starvation or war. The plunder of human capital. For those of us analyzing long-term macroeconomic trends, the demographic profile of who left is the most alarming data point. This was not a flight of the desperate. It was a flight of the prepared. 3/4 of the immigrants were of working age. Across almost every country, the share of university-educated individuals who left was higher than those who stayed. These were the doctors, the engineers, the nurses, the accountants, and the highly skilled tradesmen. Every single one of them carried human capital that had been entirely funded by their home country. Consider the mathematics of this transfer. A medical degree from the Romanian city of Cluj cost the state between 100,000 and 300,000 euros to produce. When a newly minted doctor took her training across the border, the investment paid by Romanian taxpayers instantly became a massive, uncompensated subsidy to the German healthcare system. By 2020, 28% of all Romanian doctors and 24% of all nurses had emigrated. Bulgaria's situation is even more dire. Today, the country has only 4.2 nurses per 1,000 people, half the European average. The average Bulgarian nurse is 53 years old and a third of every new graduating class leaves the moment they qualify. This created a direct wealth transfer mechanism. Western Europe imported the critical workers it could no longer produce domestically due to its own aging demographics, while Eastern Europe exported the workers it had spent 3 decades training. The receiving countries paid the wages, but the sending countries paid the systemic costs. For Canadian retirees and investors, this dynamic should strike a familiar chord. We often celebrate Canada's robust immigration numbers, which bring vital medical professionals, engineers, and care workers to our shores. Yet, we rarely discuss the macroeconomic math. Canada is the beneficiary of this exact same wealth transfer, absorbing the educational investments of developing nations to prop up our own aging demographic pyramid. However, the sword swings both ways, as the cost of living and housing skyrockets in Toronto, Vancouver, and Halifax. We are increasingly watching our own highly educated youth tech workers, doctors, and specialists migrate southward to the United States in search of stronger currency and better purchasing power. If this quiet brain drain accelerates, we risk mirroring the very hollowing out we see in Eastern Europe. The hollowed hinterlands and the social cost. The economic statistics manifest in undeniable physical scars across the landscape. By 2021, Bulgaria's National Statistics Office released a figure that politicians in the capital tried to ignore. 100 Bulgarian villages had precisely 0 permanent residents. Nearly 600 villages had 9 residents or fewer. In Lithuania, the town of Visaginas built to house 33,000 nuclear plant workers, saw its population plummet to 80,700 with an average age of 55 after the plant closed. But the most profound tragedy is the human cost, specifically the children left behind. In Romania alone, the Soros Foundation noted over 115,000 students had at least one parent working abroad. In Moldova, the count was 100,000. In Ukraine, before the recent conflict, Nijumandi's children, often dubbed Euro orphans or strawberry children, named after the Spanish farms their mothers went to work and are raised by a tired, aging generation of grandparents. The mothers send money home and make video calls on Sundays, but psychologists note a consistent pattern of insecurity and abandonment that no financial remittance can ever replace. This brings us to a fundamental societal truth. An economy cannot be sustained purely on wire transfers. A grandmother in Milan receives excellent care from a Romanian domestic worker, ensuring the Italian social system functions. But back in EOC, the Romanian social system is fundamentally missing its mothers. The pension crisis and the illusion of growth. On paper, some of these nations appeared to thrive. Poland is frequently heralded as the post-communist success story, with its real GDP nearly tripling between 1990 and 2020. Warsaw became a gleaming banking hub. Yet, when the UK opened its labor market in 2004, expecting perhaps 13,000 Polish workers, 1 million arrived within 3 years, while the national economy boomed. Regional cities like D and Walbersee emptied out. The country grew, but the local communities hollowed. The IMF calculated that the cumulative real GDP for Eastern Europe was about 7 percentage points lower in 2015 than it would have been without this mass emigration. The region lost 14 percentage points of economic convergence with Western Europe for good. And then the bill came due. Today, the German pension system is held up by the working age contributions of immigrants from Poland, Bulgaria, and Romania. Meanwhile, the Bulgarian pension system runs a deficit of roughly 1.9 billion euros a year. Over 500,000 working-age Bulgarians pay their pension contributions in Western Europe. The country that trained the workers does not collect their taxes. The country that hired them does. This is a critical point of reflection for the silver generation here in Canada. The bedrock of our old age, Security OS, and the Canada Pension Plan, CPP, relies entirely on a robust, taxable, working-age population. An aging society simply cannot fund its own retirement without young people generating economic velocity. Eastern Europe proves that when the working generation vanishes, The math behind national pension schemes breaks down irreparably. As we look at the depopulation of rural Canada from the prairie farm towns to the outports of Newfoundland, we must ask ourselves, are the communities we built generating enough local opportunity to retain our grandchildren? Or are we simply exporting them to major urban centers and foreign markets? Mechanisms of survival. How families endured in this massive demographic catastrophe. There were no sweeping policy victories that reversed the tide. However, certain families and communities survived intact, and their strategies offered timeless financial lessons. First was the remittance economy. A brother working in Birmingham sending £200 a month back to Poland could insulate his family from every currency, wobble, and political crisis at home. In Albania, remittances reached 28% of the national economy. Having an earner in a stronger currency zone provided built-in insurance against local collapse. Second was circular migration. Highly skilled tradesmen realized they did not need to abandon their homes. By working 80-hour weeks in London and returning home on weekends, they earned in British pounds but lived in Polish. They kept their families intact, bought local property, and funded their lives without permanently emigrating. It is a mechanism that rewards hard work and leverages the gap between a high-wage environment and a low-cost home base. Third was the retention of community fabric. The places that survived held a stable population and efficiently absorbed the capital returning from those who left. Towns with thick social, kiza, church, a strong family network. A trusted local market gave returning workers a safe place to invest their foreign earnings. Where the social fabric held, the town survived. Where it tore, the town emptied. Fourth was the acquisition of language. Portable skills proved invaluable. A Romanian nurse fluent in Italian earned 1.5 times what her non-fluent peer earned, a compounding premium that lasted a lifetime. Finally, and most crucially, for long-term wealth preservation, the reliance on real, hard assets. The Polish villager who used her son's remittances from England to buy hectares of local farmland saw her family's wealth survive every banking scare and European political shock. Conversely, those who bought stock in the Warsaw Stock Exchange watched half their wealth evaporate in the 2008 financial crisis. This is the oldest lesson in financial history and one that resonates deeply with prudent Canadian investors. Fiat currencies can be devalued by central banks. Financial accounts can be frozen, but a government cannot easily devalue a hectare of productive farmland or a paid-off home in a stable market town. Real assets do not care which political party holds office. The families who survived the 30-year shock of Eastern Europe were those who used their working-age earnings to buy something tangible on home soil that their children could inherit. The global echo and the nature of true wealth. The lessons of Eastern Europe are not confined to the post-Soviet bloc. They are a preview of the demographic winter encroaching on the broader Western world. Rural counties across the American Great Plains and Appalachia have been losing population for 40 years. Spanish rural interiors and Italian villages are suffering identical fates, prompting governments to literally give houses away to anyone willing to pay the heating bill. In Canada, while our total population grows through federal policy, the internal mechanics are shockingly similar. Wealth and youth are violently funneling into a handful of metropolitan areas, leaving our historic towns to shoulder the burden of aging infrastructure, declining tax bases, and shuttered schools. The profound truth we must extract from the silent collapse of Eastern Europe is a redefinition of value itself. Eastern Europe did not collapse from what it lacked. It collapsed from what it had successfully built. It produced incredibly capable people. But the open borders of a globalized world meant the value of those people ultimately flowed to whoever could pay them in a stronger currency. As we plan our estates, structure our investments, and advise our children and grandchildren, we must remember the wisdom of the ancients. As Xenophon of Athens noted in the world's first book on economics over 2 millennia ago, wealth is not merely gold sitting in a vault, nor is it a digital number on a brokerage screen. Wealth is the ability to make things produce. Real wealth is productive land. Real wealth is a skilled worker who who chooses to stay and build in their community. Real wealth is a family that remains closely knit across generations. Wealth is a village where the buses still run, where the schools remain open, and where the young are present to care for the old. To our viewers of the Silver Generation, as you look at your portfolios and your family legacies, consider what you are truly building. Are your investments grounded in the tangible, real assets that survive systemic shocks? Are we doing everything we can to ensure Canada remains a place our youth want to build their futures in, rather than a place they eventually migrate away from? Thank you for your time, your wisdom, and your continued engagement with these vital global topics. Your generations built the foundations of this country, and your foresight today will protect it for tomorrow. I appreciate you spending this half an hour of your attention with me. Until next time, invest wisely and look after your families.